On a fine day, Earth was suddenly approached by numerous alien spaceships, and it was clear they had come to invade. We are introduced to the main character, Ataru, who at that moment was chasing after Shinobu, his crush, to beg her forgiveness for constantly checking out other girls. Just as Shinobu was about to give him another chance, he turned his gaze to a girl walking by, so Shinobu punched him in the face. While Ataru was feeling down, a monk approached, mistakenly thinking Ataru was about to jump off a bridge, and tried to stop him, only to accidentally push him into the river. After getting back on shore, Ataru had to explain the misunderstanding, and the monk, after examining him, said that Ataru had terrible fortune, he was about to encounter great misfortune. Ataru didn't believe him and walked away, but the monk introduced himself as Cherry, a wandering monk. Right after that, Ataru's mother and Shinobu arrived to tell him that something really had happened. Government agents immediately surrounded him to take him away. Back at home, Ataru met the leader of the alien demons, who said that he had made a deal with the Earth's government. Both sides would hold a contest, and Ataru had been chosen to represent Earth. If Ataru won, the aliens would leave Earth in peace and retreat. The chosen game was a game of tag. Right after that, Lum, the daughter of the demon leader, appeared. The leader said that Ataru would have to play tag with Lum, and if he managed to touch her horns within 10 days, he would be declared the winner. Ataru, being a pervert, got disowned by Shinobu, but he still saw this as his duty to save Earth. The next day, he went to the stadium to begin the chase with Lum, and he was shocked to discover that Lum could fly, making it impossible to touch her. For 4 days, Ataru chased her with no progress. The next 5 days flew by just as quickly, and Ataru still couldn't get close to Lum. His parents worried that Ataru would be cursed for life if he lost, but Cherry noticed a great misfortune surrounding Ataru and asked about his past. His parents revealed he was born on Friday, the 13th. There was an earthquake during his birth, and a black cat jumped over him. Misfortunes seemed to haunt him from the very start. That night, Ataru became completely hopeless, ready to accept a life of darkness, thinking he had zero chance of beating Lum. But Shinobu promised that if he won, she would marry him, not wanting to see him live in despair forever. This gave Ataru new motivation, and he vowed to do everything he could on the final day. On that last day, Ataru poured all his energy into chasing Lum. Lum, underestimating him a bit, let her guard down and he managed to grab her by the leg. But then Ataru found out Lum had a power like Pikachu. She could shoot electricity, and she electrocuted him unconscious. However, his motivation to get married made him get up and continue chasing her. Then, in a moment of brilliance, he grabbed Lum's shirt. She got mad and electrocuted him again, but now Ataru had the upper hand, as Lum had to chase him to get her shirt back. He took that chance to toss the shirt up and slipped behind her, grabbing her horns, securing an unexpected victory. But when receiving the prize, Ataru kept yelling about marriage, which made Lum think he was proposing to her, so she accepted. The demon leader saw that his daughter had made a decision, so he immediately accepted Ataru as his son-in-law. Shinobu got furious, called Ataru a traitor, and stormed off. The next day, Ataru realized he had become a world-saving hero and was ready to go girl hunting, but Lum showed up and forbade him from flirting. She decided to stay on Earth with Ataru instead of going home with her father. However, after a few days, Ataru couldn't get in touch with Shinobu to make up, since Lum kept interrupting. So he decided to divorce Lum and kicked her out. Lum got furious, electrocuted Ataru, and left. But even after she was gone, Ataru still couldn't contact Shinobu because Lum kept finding ways to jam their phone signal. After a while, Shinobu finally answered his call again, and Ataru asked her to just ignore whatever Lum said. Lum, extremely angry, amplified the signal from her spaceship to ruin their conversation. The situation between the three caused a disruption in the signal zone, preventing many airplanes from passing through. As a result, Ataru decided to go meet her in person. Lum, however, still had ways to sabotage him, this time by summoning thunderclouds and lightning. But Ataru's father gave him a rubber raincoat to protect against electricity. Cherry also followed him, hoping to witness Ataru's final moments, but his presence only made things more dangerous for Ataru. So Ataru had to send him flying out of sight first. Lum intensified the lightning when she saw Shinobu was also searching for Ataru, causing a blackout across the area. Yet, even that didn't stop Ataru and Shinobu, so Lum drove her entire spaceship down to the ground. Just as Ataru and Shinobu finally found each other, the spaceship was about to crash. After confirming the two were safe, Ataru went looking for Shinobu again, but Lum played another trick on him right in front of Shinobu. Once again, Shinobu felt like she was being toyed with by Ataru, beat him up, and walked off. Meanwhile, the city authorities came to Ataru's house demanding compensation for the town's damages. A few days later, Ataru returned to school, but his presence annoyed the whole class and the teacher because Lum kept clinging to him. Shinobu was the most annoyed and ended up being the only one to give Ataru a beating. After that, Ataru ran away from home. Lum and his family went on television to broadcast a notice asking him to come back. Even Shinobu spoke out, and Ataru, now drawing attention from everyone, was forced to leave quickly. As soon as he stepped out of a diner, he bumped into a woman. Finding her pretty, his perverted side was triggered again. But she told him that it was exactly that kind of personality that kept bringing him bad luck. She then introduced herself as a shrine maiden and claimed she had a way to lift his curse. Ataru noticed she looked unwell, so he helped her back home. She pointed him toward the shrine where she lived. Upon arriving, he met her mother and learned her name was Sakura. Her mother bore a strange resemblance to the monk Cherry, so Ataru ran away, but Sakura told her mother to catch him. Her mother tied him up and dragged him inside so Sakura could perform the bad luck removal ritual. He was thrown into a room full of talismans, and Sakura entered soon after. She suddenly had a toothache and tried to finish the ritual quickly so she could go to the hospital. But in the middle of chanting, a horde of spirits appeared and latched onto Ataru. Sakura then got a migraine and couldn't concentrate on the spell. After a while, the spirits unexpectedly left Sakura and clung entirely to Ataru, which made her feel healthy again. Once recovered, she created a black hole to suck away the spirits attached to Ataru. Just as the spirits were dealt with, the Grim Reaper suddenly appeared to take Ataru's soul. He was hospitalized, and both his family and the two girls believed he had died. But when a nurse walked in, Ataru instinctively woke up and started flirting. Clearly, everyone had worried too much. Lum immediately gave him a taste of what it's like living in a demilitarized zone. A few days later, tired of living in his own home as if he were in a prison camp, Ataru went to find Cherry to ask him to seal Lum's powers. But Lum was hiding nearby and overheard, so she chased him down and gave him a beating. A few days after that, a friend came to Ataru's house to deliver something. He said Cherry had asked him to pass it on. Inside was a letter stating that Cherry had made a ribbon that, if tied to Lum's horns, would seal her powers and only Ataru could remove it. When Lum returned, Ataru tricked her into thinking the ribbon was for decoration. She happily let him tie it on. Later, when she wanted to go for a walk, she realized she couldn't fly anymore. She tried holding hands with one of Ataru's friends to shock him, but it had no effect. Knowing he had succeeded, Ataru came out. Lum thought she might be sick or something. Shinobu happened to walk by and saw the two acting intimate in broad daylight. Worse, she overheard that Ataru had given Lum 2 ribbons even though he had never given her anything. She had even planned to bake something to bring to him, but now, disappointed, she turned and left. Ataru tried to explain but only made Shinobu even angrier. When they returned home, 2 of Ataru's friends asked to stay behind to protect Lum from him. Fearing that now Lum had lost her powers, Ataru might turn into a beast and hurt her. But Ataru kicked both of them out of the room. Lum, now powerless, tried to get closer to Ataru and stick by his side for safety, but Ataru didn't like it and reconsidered removing the ribbon from her. However, Lum refused, saying it was a gift from him. When their friends heard the arguing inside the room, they climbed in through the window. Not wanting to be interrupted, Lum kicked both of them out. In the process, she accidentally threw the box containing Cherry's letter, and one of the friends read it, realizing the truth about the ribbon. He exposed everything, prompting Lum to claw at Ataru and demand he remove it. With no other choice, Ataru complied. As soon as Lum regained her powers, she gave Ataru a high-voltage shock. Cherry, sensing bad luck, fled to Sakura's house to hide. A few days later, Ataru's class welcomed a new male transfer student named Shutaro, the heir of a major corporation. On his first day, he arrived at school via private helicopter. Meanwhile, inside the classroom, Shinobu was about to smash a desk over Ataru's head for annoying her first thing in the morning. Just as she threw the desk out the window, she noticed a parasol outside. The entire school gathered and met Shutaro. He introduced himself, and Shinobu apologized for hitting him with the desk. She began to fall for Shutaro and ignored Ataru entirely. When Shutaro arrived in class, the girls instantly noticed him. He quickly focused on Ataru, thinking he was bothering Shinobu. He also met Lum and believed she was wasting her youth marrying a fool like Ataru. But Lum firmly defended Ataru. The teacher then told the class to elect a class president. Shutaro nominated himself and was supported by the girls. He declared that as class president, he would build a punishment room for latecomers and personally handle students who skipped or left early. Though extreme, the rules didn't apply to girls, so the boys protested and nominated Ataru as his rival. During the vote, the result was a tie, as the number of boys and girls was equal. Shutaro refused to accept it and demanded a duel with Ataru. He brought a cannon and aimed to shoot an apple off Ataru's head, clearly an idiotic idea, so he threw down a glove to challenge Ataru to a martial arts duel. Ataru, being skilled at dodging, kept avoiding all the gloves and even used substitution techniques to escape. Eventually, Ataru was cornered on the rooftop. Just then, Lum passed by and caught the glove, forcing her to fight in Ataru's place. She quickly electrocuted and defeated Shutaro, granting Ataru the victory. Shutaro saw himself as a disgrace and wanted to perform a ritual of repentance, but the girls stopped him and offered him the position of vice president instead. A few days later, Shutaro began reflecting on Lum. He still didn't understand the electrifying feeling he got when around her. Lum was looking for Ataru and learned he was alone with Shinobu, so she rushed off to find them. She ran into Shutaro and soon fell right into the spot where Ataru and Shinobu were standing. Shinobu, pinned under Shutaro, was thrilled and ran off, with Ataru chasing after her. Shutaro realized he might have fallen for Lum, thus forming a four-way love triangle. The next day, the school organized a field trip for Ataru's class. During a break, Shutaro announced there was a cave nearby and invited Lum to explore it. She dragged Ataru along, and he pulled Shinobu along with him. The two boys planned to split up and go separately with the girls they liked, while the two girls had the same idea of sticking with the ones they liked. At a fork inside the cave, Shutaro turned off the lights to force a split. Yet both girls still ended up with the right person. Later, when the group reunited and faced another split, Shutaro turned off the lights again, but this time, the two girls ended up separating from the two boys. When separated from the girls, Shutaro revealed his true nature. As someone who was afraid of the dark, he kept clinging to Ataru's leg until the two girls found them, and only then did he regain his confidence. Ataru tested this and realized that Shutaro was only putting on airs in front of the girls. However, the real problem now was that they were lost and didn't know the way out. The flashlight's battery ran out at that moment, so Lum used her electricity to light up the entire area for a brief moment. But she accidentally activated a buried ship underneath the cave, causing it to drill a hole straight up to the surface and fly away. Their teacher and the class noticed the group beneath and luckily managed to rescue them. On another day, Ataru's group invited each other to play tennis. Shutaro was displeased because Lum ended up on Ataru's team. Lum didn't want to lose to Shinobu, so she flew up and delivered a powerful hit. Meanwhile, up on a mountain, a group of crows was carrying some kind of device to Earth. They were the ones who had dropped the machine that Lum accidentally activated in the cave last time. Lum's tennis ball unexpectedly hit one of the crows in the head, causing the device to fall straight down onto the tennis court and land on Shutaro. Ataru was surprised to see that inside the device was a beautiful girl. The crows showed up and tried to wake the elder, but he was unconscious, so they took the chance to beat him up for exploiting their labor. After regaining consciousness, the elder realized that Shutaro was the exact type of man their princess liked. He explained that he and Princess Kurama, currently inside the capsule, were from a planet outside the galaxy. Their planet no longer had males, so they were forced to travel here to find men and save their people. The crows then wanted Shutaro to kiss the princess to wake her, but he was too shy, so Ataru tried to do it instead. Lum naturally wouldn't allow that and tied Ataru up. Just as Shutaro was about to carry out the noble act, Shinobu stopped him. That gave Ataru the chance to break free and rush in to kiss the princess. However, when the princess woke up, the first person she saw was Shutaro, so she assumed he was the one who kissed her. The crows decided to keep the truth a secret so the princess could have a sweet dream. When Ataru tried to claim credit, Lum electrocuted him into the sky. A few days later, Lum came to see the crows, thinking they intended to take Ataru away. But the crows all supported Kurama's love and chose to keep the secret. Only the elder wanted to follow the law and have Ataru marry the princess since he was the one who kissed her. Lum didn't like that idea, so she decided to cooperate with the crows. At that moment, while Ataru was in class, Kurama suddenly appeared to take Shutaro away. Lum and the crows also arrived. They tied up the elder so he couldn't interfere. Kurama now wanted to create new life with Shutaro, but Ataru claimed that he was the one who kissed her. Before he could finish, the crows gagged him and tied him up. The crows then explained the situation to Shutaro and told him he just needed to sleep with the princess for one night. If he hesitated, Ataru might take the opportunity again. Shutaro agreed, but Shinobu objected, so the crows had to silence her in the same way. The princess wanted to speed things up, so the crows and Lum built a room for the two to act. The girls in the class couldn't accept that Shutaro now belonged to someone else. Shutaro was later left alone with the princess, but he was still trembling and didn't dare to proceed. Ataru then sneaked in and told Kurama the truth. The elder arrived as well to reveal everything, which shocked the princess. Now Ataru and Shutaro stood for two opposing ideas, one to follow the law and one to follow the heart. The princess wanted to know what the punishment for breaking the law would be, but the elder only knew what was passed down and had no idea about the consequences. So, they installed a machine to contact the crow elders of previous generations. When asked, each elder said they were only told by the generation before them. After a while, they decided to go straight to the very first ancestor of the crow race. He then told the story of his own love and admitted he had only made up the law based on his personal experience. There were actually no consequences at all. The princess got so angry that she smashed the machine. At that moment, Shutaro confidently believed that the princess could now form a bond with him without worrying about the rules anymore. But Ataru showed her that Shutaro was nothing more than a weakling when trapped in the dark. Shutaro's image collapsed completely, and the princess then decided to go search for a new lover somewhere out there in the universe. Since there were no more rules binding her, she was now free to be greedy in choosing a life partner. A few days later, Ataru suddenly saw Cherry grilling fish at the school gate, so he asked what he was doing there. Cherry said he had just brought someone there, and Ataru's friends told him that the school had just gotten a new and incredibly beautiful nurse. Ataru rushed to check her out, only to be surprised that it was Sakura. Shutaro had already arrived before him and proposed to Sakura, which caused the rest of the boys to also rush in to fight for her hand. Of course, all of them ended up getting beaten up and kicked out by Sakura. Later, a few teachers approached Sakura for help with a matter specifically. They needed her to exercise a pair of cursed gloves. But then Cherry suddenly burst in chasing a cat that had just stolen his fish. Sakura chased him out but accidentally flung away one of the gloves. Lum, who had flown to school, found it and brought it to Ataru to ask about it. When he put it on, the glove suddenly took control of him and made him hug anyone nearby from Lum to Shinobu, and then the rest of the girls at school. Shutaro accused Ataru of using the glove as an excuse to justify his indecent behavior, but the glove also made him hug Shutaro too. Shutaro shuddered in disgust from being touched and drew his sword, demanding to give Ataru a beating. Ataru had to push him away, and just then, Sakura arrived and explained that the glove was cursed. It would make the wearer hug anyone, even their enemies. The other glove had the opposite effect. Whoever wore it would knock out everyone in range, including friends. Ataru ended up wearing both gloves. He hugged Lum with one hand, while the other hand was about to become abusive, but then he used his own face to take the blow. That gave Sakura an idea. She set up a ring and put Ataru and Lum inside to do whatever they wanted. So Ataru hugged his wife while repeatedly punching himself in the face. Eventually, he knocked himself out, and the gloves were removed as the curse had lifted. Afterward, Ataru hugged Sakura and pretended the glove was still controlling him, so she put it on and gave him a beating. A few days later, the boys in Ataru's class grew jealous that Shutaro was getting more and more love letters from girls, so they came up with a plan to bring him down. They decided to fake a love letter and send it to Ataru, hoping it would cause the two to compete and take each other down. After writing a fake letter, they even kissed it and handed it to Ataru. When Ataru heard that a pretty girl had sent him a love letter, he was thrilled and read it aloud. It was full of insults toward Shutaro. Shutaro glanced at the letter and, seeing the handwriting looked childish, didn't believe the girl who wrote it actually existed. After Lum heard that Ataru received a love letter, she became jealous and jumped into Shutaro's arms to make Ataru jealous in return. But Ataru fully supported the two getting together. Shutaro and Ataru then made a bet to see whether the girl who sent the letter was real. The group of boys who planned this decided to go all the way, so they hired a girl to pretend to be the letter writer for 1 hour. The next day, Ataru received a meeting request and was eager to meet his admirer. Lum still tried to make him jealous by saying she'd go with Shutaro, and Ataru still encouraged the two. But now the boys panicked because the girl they hired messaged them saying she had a stomachache and couldn't come. Lum overheard everything and decided to let Ataru get humiliated for once. That afternoon, Ataru and the boys gathered at the meeting spot, while Lum stuck to her decision not to help him. They waited for nearly an hour, and Shutaro finally said he'd only wait another 15 minutes. If no one showed up, Ataru would be considered the loser and have to give up his spot as class president to him. And if Shutaro became class president, everyone already knew what would happen. At this moment, Lum couldn't bear to see Ataru being teased anymore, so she decided to pretend to be the letter writer and came to meet him. At first, when they met, both Ataru and the boys were stunned, but when Ataru recognized Lum, she told him to play along if he wanted to save face. The two then left together, and Lum explained everything to Ataru. For the first time, he realized that Lum had always been this adorable. Lum was about to fly back first, but Ataru grabbed her hand so they could walk together a little longer. A few days later, Ataru was excited to go home and eat hot pot with his family. But as soon as he got to his room, Lum had already changed clothes and told Ataru to come with her to her hometown to attend the annual festival, since she had already prepared a space portal there. As soon as they arrived in his wife's hometown, Ataru was thrown into a battle. It seemed like a serious war, but in reality, it was just a ball-throwing competition. Meanwhile, Ataru's parents were waiting at home for him to eat hot pot, but when he didn't show up, they worried that he had been led astray by bad friends. Ataru, on the other hand, noticed a pretty girl and climbed up a pole to try and talk to her. Lum told him that the girl was 10, her childhood friend, and she couldn't let Ataru flirt with her friend. Ataru's parents ended up eating all the hot pot themselves without saving any for him. Suddenly, they heard Ataru's voice echoing faintly in the air. At that moment, Cherry showed up and predicted that Ataru had gone to the underworld, thinking he had passed away. His parents believed it, especially since they had been hearing his voice in the air. Meanwhile, Ataru was making Lum angry, and Ten also joined in scolding him. Out of jealousy, Lum knocked over all the balls, causing their team to lose. Cherry then ate the hot pot Ataru's mom had made, and she asked him to hold a prayer ceremony for Ataru. Ataru was then chosen to be punished for making his wife's team lose. Ataru's parents were shown a vision by Cherry of him being punished by demons, which made them even more convinced that he was being tormented for living a bad life. A few days later, Ataru returned but caught a cold, so his friends came over to visit him, though most of the boys came just to see Lum. But Lum wasn't home at that time. Suddenly, Cherry arrived and sensed an evil aura nearby. Ataru's closet suddenly burst open with snow, and then a girl appeared. Cherry recognized her as a Yuki-Ana, a snow spirit. She said she had something urgent to attend to beyond the portal in the closet and needed someone to go with her. The whole group followed, including Ataru. On the other side of the door was Neptune, the home of the snow girl. She led them to a hole and then jumped in. Shutaro kicked Ataru in first to test the way. There, Ataru reunited with Lum, who told him that the snow girl was Yuki, her friend. Yuki was a princess and had many maids. When they saw Ataru's group, they asked for help because all the men there had been sent off as migrant laborers, so there were no workers left to clear the snow. While Shutaro and the other boys were shoveling snow, Yuki invited Ataru and Shinobu to her house. Yuki took off her outer clothes, which excited Ataru, but Lum electrocuted him again, forcing him to run away, bumping into Yuki. She noticed that Ataru seemed sick, so she brought him to her room. Yuki was rather free-spirited and was willing to steal Lum's man if she liked him. But then a snowman creature burst in and interrupted. It was one of Yuki's servants and didn't like anyone, especially men, getting close to her. The snowman chased Ataru, forcing him to flee back to the hole, and he had no choice but to jump in, reappearing on his own rooftop. The media soon arrived after discovering the snowman grabbing Ataru on the roof, and news of Ataru and the snowman quickly made headlines. After recovering at home, Ataru asked Lum to close the portal to prevent the snowman from following Yuki here. They also noticed that Shutaro had been missing for a while. It turned out that all this time, he had been exploited for labor and kept shoveling snow on Neptune without knowing. Not long after, Ataru's class officially entered summer break and the semester ended. As they were leaving, Ataru stood up in front of the class and declared that he wanted to give up. The teacher asked if he was sure and said a bunch of things as if Ataru's decision would affect his future. The teacher thought that Ataru was planning to drop out because of his terrible grades. Shutaro then stepped up and claimed that Ataru was trying to give up his position as the main character. So everyone volunteered to become the new main character of the show. Cherry and Sakura also arrived to compete for the role. Lum's friends came to apply too, along with many other characters. But Ataru then announced that he only wanted to give up his position as class president, nothing else. A few days later, Ataru and everyone went to the swimming pool to have fun. In fact, this was a pool that Shutaro's family had bought, but Ataru only saw the boys in swimwear as a bunch of talking vegetables. Lum and Shinobu also arrived afterward, and Sakura found the group just as noisy as always. Ataru, being insensitive, ran toward her and got punched into the pool by Sakura. Lum watched over the pool for a long while without seeing Ataru resurface, so she dove in to look for him. She discovered Ataru being invited by a yakai under the pool to stay and hang out at its home. But Ataru was having trouble breathing, so Lum went down in his place. The yakai didn't notice and just thought Ataru had turned into a cute girl. After resurfacing, Ataru told everyone about what was under the pool, but no one believed him. They thought he was trying to spread fake rumors to ruin the reputation of the place. Sakura still wanted to check it out. Meanwhile, the yakai, realizing it was running out of tea at home, came up to the surface to buy some. Since everyone wasn't blind, they quickly discovered it. Ataru's group then went down to take a look, just as the yakai had left its house, which made them even more certain Ataru was lying. But the yakai later returned to greet the visitors upon seeing many guests. Shutaro, upon recognizing it, immediately demanded that it leave. He and the others quickly rushed to the surface for air. Shutaro then insisted on kicking the yakai out, even though it just wanted to live peacefully. But since the place wasn't its home, it had no right to stay. Ataru and Lum hoped it would find a better new place to live. That night, back at home, Ataru discovered that the yakai had moved into his bathroom. After a month, Ataru's mother decided to kick the yakai out of the house because it couldn't keep camping in the bathroom forever. Ataru then had to help it find a new place to stay, and his mother promised to send it supplies once it had found a new home. He then brought the yakai to the beach and met some others there. Ataru later accompanied it elsewhere to find a place to live. At the same time, Sakura and her boyfriend went on a date at a seaside restaurant. The restaurant was hosting a food challenge, and for the first time, we saw how massive Sakura's appetite was, from a giant plate of noodles to a dozen-pound steak. Ataru then chose a quiet place for the yakai to jump into. It started feeling lonely when Ataru left, but unexpectedly, Sakura and her boyfriend came by. The yakai was about to come greet them, but Ataru stopped it because he didn't want to interrupt the date. At the same time, Lum's group was watching from a distance. During that, a little boy walked by Ataru and thought he had a pretty cute pet. The boy had to abandon his own pet because his family wouldn't let him keep it. Sakura and her boyfriend were about to kiss when she felt someone watching. The whole group had to hide so she wouldn't get suspicious. But just as she thought it was her imagination and was about to continue, the yakai appeared next to them to observe. Ataru quickly dragged it away so Sakura could continue, but there was no way she'd let it go that easily. Meanwhile, the boy still didn't know where to leave his pet. The yakai and Ataru's group then sat on the beach to eat. While eating, the yakai started complaining about its hardships to trigger guilt in the group. The boy saw them and hoped they would take care of his pet. Right after that, Ataru came up with the idea to put the yakai in a box and leave it on the roadside for someone to adopt. The boy saw Ataru's group holding the box and thought his pet had been adopted. But then he changed his mind and ran back to take the box. Shinobu, noticing the box, realized the boy had made a mistake. However, inside the box was actually Cherry, and the whole group realized they had just picked up a creepy old man. Some time later, the yakai sent a photo to Ataru's house to let them know it was living well with the boy who had adopted it. When summer ended, Ataru returned to school, and today, the principal informed Ataru's teacher that they would once again have a transfer student, and that transfer student turned out to be Lum. Her father also came afterward to complete the enrollment procedures for her. The teacher was quite bewildered, as it was his first time being responsible for an alien student. But since Lum had already gotten used to the school environment for a while, it would be fine. When Ataru heard that there was a new transfer student, he eagerly went to check. But the moment Lum appeared, he choked in shock. He struggled desperately for help that no one understood, and then collapsed on the floor. Later, when they went out to the field for the sports festival, Ataru heard that the class next door also had a new transfer student. He immediately noticed that girl and approached to talk to her, learning that her name was Ran. Seeing her husband flirting with another girl again, Lum pulled him away and told Ran to meet her behind the gym later. Ran agreed and went to meet her. Then we learned that Lum and Ran were childhood friends. However, this sweet and gentle image of Ran was actually a fake persona she created to live peacefully at school. Ran then reminisced about the past with Lum and revealed her true nature. Both Ran and Lum used to dream about an ideal boy that they both liked, but Lum got engaged first, which deeply disappointed Ran. As a result, Ran vowed to steal Lum's husband using her kiss, which could suck the life force from others. Ran wanted Lum to keep her alien identity a secret, or else she would reveal an embarrassing secret from Lum's past. The first event of the sports festival was a scavenger race. After running a distance, participants had to pick a card and find the item described on it. Shutaru was asked to find an electrifying beauty, while Ran, for some unknown reason, called Ataru over. Lum was dragged away by Shutaru, so Ran took Ataru behind the gym and tried to kiss him. However, Lum arrived in time to interrupt and dragged Ataru away. The second event was a cavalry battle. Ataru still tried to find a way to kiss Ran, and the moment he found his target, he charged at her. Lum tried to stop him, but Ran also made her way toward Ataru. Of course, the other boys didn't want Ran to be taken by Ataru, so they also tried to block him. However, Ran intentionally fell toward Ataru, forcing Lum to push someone else to take the hit instead. The poor guy who was kissed immediately lost his youthful energy and turned into an old man quietly pruning plants. That afternoon, Lum and Ran sat by the river to talk and stargaze. In the past, the two of them had watched shooting stars together and wished for a good husband. But when Lum walked away, Ran realized that the boy she liked actually had feelings for Lum. That was why she wanted to steal Lum's husband as revenge. The next day, Lum received a letter from Ran asking her to meet behind the gym. Lum found one of Ran's dolls there. It informed her that Ran would be hosting a farewell party this weekend because she would be leaving soon, and she wanted both Lum and Ataru to come. The doll said that Ran didn't want Lum to hate her and just wanted to spend her remaining time with her. Lum later found a map, and when the weekend came, she and Ataru went to Ran's house. Ataru still didn't know that Ran was an alien, so upon arrival, he just thought her house was designed like a UFO. He gave flowers to Ran, so she put them into a vase that was clearly a living creature. She forbade it from eating the flowers and then offered them cookies. Lum knew the cookies had sleeping drugs in them, so while Ran went to the kitchen, she poured the cookies into the vase's mouth, which, sure enough, fell asleep. When Ran returned, she quickly realized what happened and also brought a cake. Lum volunteered to wash the plates and wanted to see if Ran would secretly make a move on Ataru. But contrary to her expectations, Ran rejected Ataru's advances. Ran then returned to the kitchen and told Lum to come back out. However, Lum noticed Ran baking something in the oven. When she returned, Ataru had gone missing. What Ran had baked was a clone of Ataru. She pushed the fake Ataru next to the real one. When the two looked at each other, they started moving like mirror reflections. The stamp used to distinguish the two was suddenly swapped by the real Ataru, which caused Ran to give the real one back to Lum and then went looking for the fake one to kiss. When she realized she had just kissed the clone, Ran was furious. That night, Lum thought Ran had returned and felt a little regret, but the next day at school, Lum met Ran again, and Ran was still determined to get her revenge before going back. Once again, Lum didn't understand why Ran was so unpredictable. A few days later, Cherry suddenly sensed that something bad was about to happen. and right after that, his soup also showed signs of ill omen, so Cherry hoped nothing too terrible would occur. At that time, Lum saw Ataru diligently cleaning his room because Shinobu was coming over to visit. He claimed that he invited Shinobu just to discuss class matters as class president, but Lum knew well how flirtatious Ataru was. Cherry then came by to try to warn Ataru about the bad luck he would have tonight, but Ataru didn't bother to listen even though Cherry advised him to run away early. However, Ataru would only run if Shinobu went with him. Shinobu, now on her way to Ataru's house, was suddenly struck by lightning right in front of her, and a monster appeared. Meanwhile, Ataru continued ignoring Cherry's warning and sat by the window waiting for Shinobu. She suddenly floated up to the window like a ghost, but she was still alive and brought along the monster she had encountered because it kept calling Lum's name. That tiger monster then transformed into a human, and it turned out to be someone Lum had liked in the past. Ataru's mother heard the noise and came up to see what was going on and saw the guest. Even she was seduced by Lum's ex-fiancé. Ataru then advised Lum to go back home with her ex-fiancé, Rei, because clearly Rei was way more attractive than Ataru. But there had to be a reason Lum left Rei in the first place. It was because Rei couldn't control his emotions and would turn into a beast whenever he got excited. Ataru's mother brought food up for everyone, and Ataru noticed that she had put on makeup to impress the handsome guy. Rei kissed her hand, which made her blush and run away. Ataru's father, seeing that scene, felt hurt and left. Lum explained that Rei was just tasting the food still stuck on her hand, not trying to seduce her. Lum then strongly rejected and criticized Rei. Shinobu thought Rei was crying from sadness, but he was actually just moved by the delicious food. Rei didn't understand human language very well, so he pulled out a scroll to read a love confession to Lum, but Lum firmly rejected him and insulted him, while also clinging to Ataru, which made Rei angry and transform into a beast to chase Ataru. Ataru had to run out of the house and flee to a park. While chasing, Rei kept confessing his love for Lum, which made many couples in the park break up because the girls thought Rei was confessing to them. But no matter how important confessing to Lum was, Rei still didn't forget to stop by street food stalls and gobble everything up. Ataru's mother realized that even if her husband was sad and hurt, he still had to depend on her because he didn't know how to cook. When Ataru returned home, his mother came out to greet him but heard Rei's love confession and said that if it weren't for taking care of her husband and child, she would have gone with Rei. But just as they got back to the room, Rei was dragged over by all the women in the park who wanted to receive his affection, and the shopkeepers also came to demand compensation from Ataru because they thought he was the owner of the creature that destroyed their stalls. The next day, in Ataru's class during a self-study period, Rei suddenly showed up to cause trouble again, but his main goal was still Lum. Rei made the whole class chaotic, and when Shutaro learned that this was Lum's fiancé, he immediately wanted to challenge him. Naturally, Ataru and Lum left Shutaro to handle it on his own and ran outside. Ran, hearing a familiar sound, pulled Lum aside to talk. Ran wanted Lum to help make Rei pay attention to her. Meanwhile, Shinobu had calmed Rei down, and he transformed back into a human. Seeing a handsome guy, the girls immediately gathered around to give him food, and for the first time, Shutaro lost to another boy in terms of charm. Shinobu then reminded Rei of his real purpose, and Rei immediately rushed off to look for Ataru to ask about Lum, but Lum had returned and caused Rei to run straight into Ran. Ran offered Rei food that she made, and Rei sat down and ate calmly. Lum wanted Rei to understand Ran's sincerity, but clearly making someone with the instincts of a beast understand a girl's emotions was too much to ask. But at least Rei ate Ran's food calmly instead of ravenously like with others. Cherry then also came to give Rei some food to prove that he could do the same. Ran didn't want to lose, so she brought out another box for Rei. After finishing the meal, Rei told Cherry that he was still hungry, so he went back. Ran hoped Rei would come back again, but Lum did not. That afternoon, when they returned home, Ataru and Lum were shocked to find that Rei had stayed at their house to freeload. That evening, Ataru's mother informed her husband that she couldn't keep trying alone anymore and handed him a form. Ataru's father thought it was a divorce paper, but it was actually a classroom observation form for Ataru. Since classroom visits are exhausting, this time the father would have to go. Meanwhile, somewhere out in space, Lum's mother also received the classroom observation form, which somehow the school had managed to send to her. On the day of the observation, Ataru's mother still had to go because his father refused to. The reason she didn't want to go was that every time she did, Ataru would do something foolish and embarrass her. She hoped she wouldn't run into anyone she knew, but Shinobu's mother recognized her. Later that day, a horse cart arrived at the school. The school staff told the butler not to bring animals onto campus. The butler tried to explain who his madam was, but then Lum's mother's spaceship began to descend, creating a loud commotion. The spaceship crushed the horse cart, and the butler panicked, thinking his madam had been crushed. But she was safe. Lum's mother stepped out and noticed her in-law below and went to greet her, though she didn't understand human language. Lum saw the situation below and flew down to escort her mother. The other woman was Shutero's mother, who felt insulted by Lum's mother and angry that her beloved horse cart had been destroyed. She hated machines and loved the cart. She told Shutero and Lum to translate her words, saying she wanted to settle this debt with Lum's mother. However, Lum mistranslated and made her mother think destroying the cart was a good thing. Shutero's mother then threw a glove to challenge Lum's mother to a duel, but Lum's mother didn't understand. Lum then translated it, and while everyone else felt the tension rise, Lum's mother thought she had just been proposed to. The school bell rang, and everyone went home. The teacher, who had been sick, finally dragged himself to school, saw the spaceship and the horse cart, and thought his illness was making him hallucinate. Meanwhile, Ataru's mother called him to wake up and go home. Ataru was disappointed because he didn't get a chance to shine that day. The next day, Lum came to wake Ataru up again. On the way to school, Lum noticed the trees changing color. Ataru guessed the leaves would turn red in about a week. He brought a yo-yo to school to show off to girls, while Lum was sewing something to give to Ataru. Shutero thought if Ataru kept acting like a fool, Lum would spend less time on him. But Ataru didn't care and continued doing stupid things. That night, Lum finished her gift, but Ataru started complaining about her, saying she was annoying for always waking him up with violence and electrocuting him all the time. He wanted to be free like before, which made Lum angry. She didn't let Ataru see the gift she made and left him to sleep, then walked away. The next morning, Ataru's mother woke him for school, and he noticed Lum wasn't there. At school, Lum didn't show up, making Ataru feel he was now free to chase girls. That afternoon, his mother asked about Lum, but there was still no news. Ataru returned to his room and saw the doll Lum had left for him. He had never felt so empty before. The next day, he got up early on his own, went to school without flirting with girls, and stood by the window blankly staring outside. A friend noticed the Lum doll in his pocket. Shutero was convinced that Lum had left Ataru and even admired her for putting up with him for so long. Ataru suspected Shutero had kidnapped Lum, but he didn't know where she was either. Ataru had to admit that Lum had disappeared, so Shutero mobilized his forces to search for her. Ataru ran to all the places he used to go with Lum, and memories of her began to resurface in his mind. He started to feel regret and cried under the tree that Lum had once taken notice of. At this moment, Lum was busy with her parents preparing paperwork, as her passport had expired, so Lum had to go reapply. She left the doll behind because it contained a microphone that allowed her to hear Ataru's voice. She heard that Ataru was crying because he missed her, so the next day, Lum returned to be with Ataru. Although he still pretended to be fine, Lum now understood Ataru's feelings better than ever. The new year had come, and today Ataru was walking with Lum through the shopping street when suddenly a handkerchief flew into his face. Ataru sniffed the scent and realized some girl had dropped it, so he ran off to return it. The sense of smell of a girl chasing Hunter led him to an ox cart guarded by someone in black. He called out to the cart's owner to return the handkerchief, and the girl told him to come to the front. She then extended a skeletal arm to scare Ataru, causing him to panic and run away. When he got to school, Ataru told Shutero about it, but Shutero didn't believe a demon would appear in broad daylight. But while sitting in class, Shutero reconsidered what Ataru had said and found it strangely familiar. During lunch, even from the cafeteria below, there were two people dressed in black walking ahead and rolling out a red carpet for their lady to walk on. She then came to Ataru's class and ran to Shutero. The whole class asked Shutero about their relationship, and the girl said she was engaged to him. The girls immediately got angry and crowded around Shutero, while Ataru wanted to help the girl escape from Shutero. but Shutaro explained that this was Ryoko, his younger sister. Ataru also realized she was the one who scared him earlier that morning. Ryoko said she came to bring food to Shutaro, but the lunchbox was from Monday, and today was already Thursday. Since the ox cart took a long time to travel, the food had spoiled and gone bad. Shutaro refused to eat it, causing Ryoko to ask what her 3 days off from school were for. Ataru decided to step up and eat the box to make Ryoko happy, despite the whole class warning him that he might get food poisoning from it. But Lum and Ryoko were eager to feed him. Shutaro asked his sister to stay away from Ataru, but she ignored him because her brother didn't value her efforts like Ataru did. Shutaro was willing to let his sister approach anyone except Ataru. However, Ataru now also started calling Shutaro brother-in-law, though Shutaro would never accept Ataru because of his terrible personality. But Ryoko then had her subordinate stuff Shutaro into a locker, which triggered his fear of darkness and tight spaces. The boys finally discovered Shutaro's weakness, while the girls found it charming, as it awakened their maternal instincts. Ryoko began to accept Ataru, but Shutaro believed his sister was still naive and didn't yet know how terrible Ataru truly was. Shutaro threatened that if Ataru ever came to his house, he'd deal with him. But not long after, Ataru was still invited to Shutaro's house, with 2 girls following behind him, and on top of that, Sakura also arrived. Then Ten and Yuki also came because they had stopped by Lum's house and found out she was attending the New Year's party there, so they joined as well. Seeing so many people, Shutaro had no choice but to allow Ataru into the house. Shutaro's home had an elevator in the front yard to make it easier for the servants to enter. Shutaro had no idea what would happen next because Ryoko was in charge of hosting this year's New Year party. Ryoko then used a loudspeaker to welcome everyone and told them to come inside as the food was already prepared. Once inside, the group saw arrows on the floor and followed them. They were led to a room and had to sit on cushions of their own choosing. Immediately after, Ten and Ataru fell out of the room while the others were pushed out. Ten and Ataru were taken by a conveyor belt underneath to another place, while the others were herded to a separate location by Ryoko's guards. Ten and Ataru were then brought back to the front gate and had to follow the set path again. But Ten didn't like following the rules, so he went the opposite direction and ended up being caught, tied up, and removed from the game by the guards. Ataru then proceeded and arrived at a room with Shutaro, Lum, and Shinobu. Shutaro's grandfather came to offer tea, but after they drank it, he revealed the tea was laced with a paralytic drug. Only Lum was unaffected by the drug. As for Ataru, he seemed to be used to it already, so when he saw Ryoko walking by, he still tried to crawl after her, only to end up falling into the koi pond and being fished out by a group of people in black outfits who then gave him a change of clothes. Meanwhile, Lum reached a room where she found Rei and Sakura, and the 3 of them had a cake-eating contest, with Lum being quickly eliminated since she couldn't eat as fast as the other 2. Elsewhere, Shutaro and Shinobu went together and met Shutaro's father, who locked Shutaro in a dark room. But since Shinobu was with him, he wasn't too scared. The 2 then managed to trick and trap Shutaro's father in the dark room so they could continue onward. It was then revealed that Shutaro's entire family was playing a board game, with the mansion itself being the board and Ataru's group being the game pieces. Shutaro landed on a space where he was to be chased by a monster, so the bodyguards smeared him with food sent to attract Rei to chase after him. Meanwhile, Lum had to stop and wait for a cow to cross the road. Yuki later met up with Ataru, and both of them received New Year's lucky money envelopes from Shutaro's grandfather. Thinking it was money, they opened them, only to find 2 iron weights instead. Yuki insisted that in Earth's culture, lucky money must contain real money. Although Shutaro's grandfather claimed he was joking, Yuki didn't find it funny because lucky money absolutely must contain money. The group faced many challenges, and just when they were about to reach the finish line at the end of the day, Ryoko pulled a trick on them by launching Ataru, Shutaro, and Shinobu into the sky on a rocket, which exploded into fireworks, ending the event without any real winner. Not long after, Ataru's parents were overjoyed to have Lum around to try on festival clothes for them to take pictures. They were happy to have a daughter, which made Ataru sulk and apologize to the family for not being the daughter they wished for. He then stormed out of the house in frustration and found a kid in the mailbox, whom he brought inside to show everyone. Lum recognized him as her cousin Ben and was surprised that he had made it here. The boy explained that he had asked the post office to send him, which is why he still had postage marks on his body. The group then went to Sakura's house to celebrate the new year, and Ben tagged along. He immediately flew up to Ataru and asked if he was really Lum's boyfriend, saying he wouldn't accept him. Seeing Ataru annoyed him, Ben breathed fire on him. Upon arriving at Sakura's house, Ben easily won the favor of Sakura and Shinobu, prompting Ataru to imitate him, which backfired. Ran then appeared, working as a shrine maiden, and Ben immediately recognized her. Ran tried to pretend she didn't know Ben to hide her identity, but Lum insisted on provoking her, forcing Ran to imply one of Lum's embarrassing secrets to get her to shut up. The group then played a card game, but Ataru kept using it as an excuse to touch the girl's hands, causing Ben to spit fire to stop him from acting on his intentions. Ben later showed off his flying ability and was praised by everyone, except Ataru, who mocked him and got fire spat on his face again. Ataru went to cool off in the water when Ran approached him and expressed sympathy, saying Lum was spoiling that kid too much. She tried to take advantage of the moment and kiss Ataru, but Ben spat fire again to stop them. Furious, Ataru grabbed a frying pan to chase after Ben. Thanks to the pan, he was able to block the fire and charge straight at Ben, forcing Lum to protect him. Sakura ended up throwing Ataru into the koi pond, and Lum scolded him for being childish and picking fights with a kid. However, Ben slowly began to feel attracted to Sakura. The next day, back at Ataru's house, Ben had taken over his study desk. Ataru still tried to provoke him even though Lum advised him not to pick fights with a child. Lum asked Ben what he was doing, and he replied that he was writing a letter. After asking Lum to translate it, the two found out that Ben wanted to write a love letter to confess to Sakura. Ataru offered to be Ben's love advisor since he was very good at romance stuff, but in reality, he was setting Ben up. When Sakura got home and unexpectedly received the letter, she read it and found it filled with vulgar and dirty language like a harassment letter. She decided to go meet and beat up the one who wrote it. At the meeting place, Ataru was surprised that Sakura still showed up, but he had a plan and quickly pushed Ben to come forward. Strangely, Sakura completely forgave Ben because she couldn't bring herself to hit a child. Ataru had even planned Ben's entire outing, and the first stop was a couple's cafe. Since Sakura couldn't bring a child into that kind of place, she brought Ben to another cafe instead. Little Ben burst into tears because he had made plans that Sakura didn't like, so she decided she would go along with him afterward. Right after that, the two went to the movies, but it turned out to be a somewhat adult-themed film. When Ben started crying again after she refused, Sakura reluctantly agreed to go in with him, only to realize it was a pretty dumb movie, and Ben quickly got bored and sleepy. However, Lum raised her voice and exposed them, leading Sakura to discover both of them. She threw them out of the theater for not being old enough to watch adult content. Suspecting Ataru was behind Ben's plans all day, she became certain it was his scheme after Lum accidentally revealed the rest of the schedule when Ben woke up. That night, Ben sat down and confessed his feelings to Sakura, but Ataru noticed she was wearing a ring, meaning someone else had already proposed to her. Ben realized he had been rejected, but instead of accepting it, he blamed Ataru and breathed fire on him. Some time later, the teachers held a meeting and began investigating the eateries frequently visited by students. One student overheard this and ran to tell the entire class that the teachers were about to launch an anti-snacking enforcement week. Of course, Ataru and the rest of the class refused to accept such dictatorship and chose to rebel. The next day, right before lunch break, both the teachers and students were ready to go to war. The bell rang and the students immediately dashed toward the school gate like they were crossing a border, but Shutaro and a few others sided with the teachers to counter the students' campaign. However, such a small number couldn't possibly stop all the students. Ataru and a few others climbed over the wall to escape. Next came the second obstacle. They observed the usual student-frequented shops, but saw no guards, so they tried entering and asked if their teacher was around. The shopkeeper said no, but in fact, the teacher was hiding inside, waiting to catch anyone who touched food. When noodles were brought out, the shopkeeper signaled Ataru to run. He understood, and immediately, the teacher leapt out, forcing the group to flee. Other students soon joined them as other shops were also under surveillance. They were blocked by Shutaro's group, but the girls pleaded with him until he gave in and let them through. The boys took advantage of this by cross-dressing to sneak past. The whole group then reached an elderly lady's shop, but Sakura was already there and had eaten all the food. The teacher continued the chase but was soon arrested by a detective who called the police, suspecting him of stalking students. That detective worked for the shopping district, and since students were valuable customers, they were eager to help. The students split up to distract the teachers. Ataru's group was led through a back door by a shop owner where a teacher had already been tied up. Shinobu was working part-time there, and according to the owner, this was the safest place for students. Lum then ordered a super spicy cake, and just as Ataru began flirting with Shinobu, she shoved the entire spicy cake into his mouth. Panicking, Ataru bolted. Shutero's group saw Ataru running and fled in the opposite direction. Along the way, two teachers were resting. Shutero crashed into the older one and kept running, and Ataru collided with the same old teacher. The younger teacher nearby assumed the elderly teacher had heroically sacrificed himself and urged the others to follow his example and punish the students, though in reality, the old teacher was fine. Nevertheless, the students were determined to fight just to be able to eat. The two sides clashed throughout the afternoon, and the first day of anti-snacking week ended in a draw. A few days later, Ben was again taken out to eat by a group of older girls. Ataru grew jealous because the boy was being pampered by every girl. The three girls then asked about the person who had proposed to Sakura, and she revealed it was Tsubame, a licensed and certified spiritualist. He sounded like a perfect match, but Ben wanted to make sure Sakura's destiny truly aligned with Tsubame's. The boy pulled out a device containing an ad for the prophetic eye, a tool that helps users see who their soulmate really is. The boy ordered it and showed it to Sakura to try out, but she didn't believe in it, so Shinobu gave it a try. When Shinobu looked at it, she was shocked and couldn't believe what she had just seen. Lum also tried it, but the other half that appeared was Rei, while Ran also looked and saw Ataru in it. Neither of them dared to say it out loud, knowing that if they did, the other would go ballistic. Sakura noticed the three girls were all silent, so she asked what they saw. Shinobu confessed that she saw Tsubame's image. So Sakura had to try it too and saw both Shutero and Ataru in it. At that moment, the two had met Tsubame outside, and they all came in together to see what was going on, only to be caught by Sakura. She then scolded Shutero and Ataru because she truly believed she would marry both of them. This made Lum and Ran realize what was going on, and so the girls started fighting each other to win back their rightful lovers. Meanwhile, Tsubame was being led by Shinobu into his supposed fate. But little Ben, who had left earlier, then heard from the vendor that they had accidentally delivered a defective product, and the defective version would show the person who, if married, would lead to misfortune. The real item was later delivered, but by then, it seemed too late. Not long after, a young man carrying a ladder showed up at the school and climbed inside. He warned the teacher not to interfere or something would happen, but the only thing that happened was that he fell off the ladder. Meanwhile, Ataru and Shutaro were in the middle of a baseball match. Ataru was throwing the match on purpose in exchange for 10 swimming tickets. When he threw the ball, Shutaro managed to catch it, but was called for a fault, and the ball flew and hit the young man who was hiding in the tree. He fell and even swallowed the ball literally. Shutaro then informed everyone that this was Tobai, son of the top sporting goods manufacturing group. The families of Shutaro and Tobai had been rivals and full of resentment for a long time, so the two of them had clashed many times. On one occasion, they faced off in a baseball match, but instead of playing normally, they threw their equipment at each other's heads. Shutaro won because a bat caused more damage than a ball. After that, Tobai went up the mountain to train and returned every year to challenge Shutaro again, but nearly 20 matches all ended in a draw. So this time, he came back again for a rematch. However, Shutaro was in the middle of the school's internal tournament, so he had to postpone the duel. Ryoko suddenly arrived on horseback and felt that it was pitiful for Tobai to have come all this way only to be ignored, so she wanted Ataru to let Tobai join the team, as she had long had feelings for him. When the two guys heard this, they beat Tobai up. But Ryoko's love was one-sided because Tobai hated girls due to being teased by Ryoko since childhood. Ryoko and Shutaro then made a bet. If Shutaro won, Ryoko would give up on her feelings for Tobai. Ataru didn't accept having someone shoved into the team without knowing his skills, so he tested Tobai, who indeed turned out to be quite bad. Still, Ataru accepted him anyway because he was aiming to lose. The score was currently tied, so Ataru's team wasn't allowed to score. Ataru sent Tobai to bat, and sure enough, he was terrible at it. But Ryoko hoped he could hit the ball no matter what, so the men in black made their move. They stopped Shutaro and brought the ball directly to Tobai to hit. They also blocked anyone trying to sabotage Tobai, so Ataru had to try and stop him at the final base. However, that base had already been rigged with a hole dug by Ryoko. Ataru tried to tag Tobai with the ball, but he ended up swallowing it and then vomited out a bunch of other balls, causing the match to end in another tie, requiring extra innings. Not long after, Tobai was hiding under a bridge inside Shutaro's house, looking for a way to challenge him again. But Shutaro was missing that day, so Ryoko took his octopus pets out for a walk instead. When Tobai saw someone pass by, he threw a weight and a letter onto the bridge. Ryoko got the letter and thought it was a love letter from Tobai. One of the octopuses, angry at having the weight thrown at its head, hurled it back and hit Tobai in the head. Shutaro arrived at that moment, having been locked up in a concrete block by Ryoko since last night. He noticed Tobai's letter and forbade Ryoko from having feelings for Tobai anymore, but she refused and detonated a bomb to blow Shutaro away. Ataru and his family were having a relaxing Sunday when Ryoko called Ataru asking for help, as she was being chased by her brother. Ataru agreed and was taken away, while Lum chased after them and found a letter on the ground that revealed the location where she could find Ataru. Ataru, at that time, still thought he had been brought along to protect Ryoko from Shutaro. Meanwhile, Lum had arrived at Tobai's place and saw him in trouble as the latter had been blown over by the wind, leaving him stuck. Lum grabbed his leg and dropped him down. Just then, Tobai noticed that Ryoko had also arrived and thought she came to stop their duel. Tobai was then dragged to the ground by Ryoko's men, while Lum tried to remind Ataru that he was just being used. A person in black then revealed himself to be Shutaro, who was determined not to hand over his sister. Tobai, who had always wanted to defeat Shutaro and had trained hard for it, was acknowledged by Shutaro, who promised to let him marry his sister if he won. Ataru had been waiting for that sentence and lunged in to grab Shutaro's sword and threw him away. Shutaro tried to regain his balance, but Lum struck him with lightning, causing a wooden pole to hit his face. Lum won the fight, but Ataru had to run away with Ryoko because he knew Lum wouldn't like her. However, Shutaro soon returned and kicked Ataru away. Lum caught him midair, and Ryoko, not wanting to trouble Ataru any further, jumped down herself, landing right on Tobai's face. She believed Tobai had sacrificed himself to save her. Shutaro misunderstood further even though Tobai tried to explain that he had no romantic feelings for Ryoko. When Shutaro mentioned the love letter, Lum brought out the letter she had picked up earlier. Tobai thought it was a duel letter, but it was written on pretty paper like a love letter. Shutaro then wanted to finish the duel, but though Ryoko said she wanted to help Tobai, she ended up causing him even more trouble. She handed him an axe which he threw upward, cutting down a pile of wood. She tried to help him dodge by throwing an anchor at his head. When she tried to give him a weapon, she threw an entire barbell on his neck, knocking him out. As he tried to run away, he was blown back by a grenade right into Ryoko. Shutaro acknowledged Tobai's efforts, even though he had constantly suffered because of Ryoko, and decided to let them be together. On a beautiful day, Lum found Ran shopping for a visit to Rei. Lum intentionally came over to ask about it, but was met with an aggressive response from Ran, so she gave up. When Ran brought food to Rei, he devoured it and then turned to kiss her cheek, which made her very happy. She later came back happily to tell Lum. When Lum visited Ran's house, she saw Ran welcoming her so cheerfully that she became suspicious of a plot. But Ran just said she wanted to make peace and told her Rei had kissed her. Lum was genuinely happy for her, making Ran realize Lum was truly a good friend. When Lum returned home, she found Rei had come to see her. Ben told her Rei came for Lum, but Lum believed he was too timing with Ran. Ran then showed up and was shocked to see Rei with Lum, thinking Lum still had feelings for Rei. Ran mentioned the kiss Rei gave her, but he didn't remember it. Ben then gave Ran a cake to cheer her up, which she ate completely, leaving some crumbs on her mouth. That's when it became clear why Rei kissed her, but Ran didn't realize it, so she remained happy about it. A few days later, Ran invited Lum out to eat and reminisce. When they were kids, Ran once invited Lum for a sleepover. Ran had wet the bed before, so her mother was very strict about it not happening again. That night, Lum needed to use the bathroom, but instead of going, she swapped places with Ran, and the next morning, Ran was scolded again for wetting the bed. She tried to explain that it was Lum, but Lum denied it, so Ran was scolded even more. Lum felt guilty and promised to give Ran the doll she liked the next time Ran came over. The next night, when Ran stayed at Lum's house, Lum did the same thing again. The next morning, when Ran's mother came to pick her up, Lum's mother was hanging the wet bed sheets outside, exposing the incident again, and Ran was scolded once more. But at least Lum kept her promise and gave Ran the doll she liked most. Not long after that, Lum invited Ran to go tease dogs, saying that whoever lost the race would have to treat the winner to ice cream. Ran was scared because she couldn't fly like Lum, but Lum dragged her along in the air while they were being chased. However, Lum slightly miscalculated the flying direction, causing Ran to smash her face into a rock. Lum promised to treat Ran to ice cream, but when it was time to pay, she still insisted on splitting the bill because Ran ran behind her and lost the bet. There was another time when Lum came to Ran's house to play darts. Ran accidentally hit her mother's favorite doll. Lum tried to take the blame for her, but since the dart's color couldn't be switched in time, Ran's mother thought that Ran had forced Lum to take the blame. Lum also felt that she herself was the reason Ran had become so mean now, so she decided to reflect on her actions. But as she was leaving, she forgot to pay again, so Ran had to pay once more, making her hate Lum even more. A few days later, Lum was jogging past Sakura's house and saw her burning something. Shinobu also passed by, so the two went in to check. They found out Sakura was grilling reptiles to make medicine. Neither of them was interested, but when they found out Sakura could make a love potion, both wanted to help. They then went down to the basement with Sakura to make the medicine and created 2 pills that looked like candy. Lum went home to give one to Ataru, but he was sleeping and somehow still resisted. He was awakened and didn't believe what Lum was trying to feed him, but when he learned it was a gift from Sakura, he ate it immediately. After that, Ataru began saying sweet things to Lum, but once outside, he started talking nonsense. The worst was when he met his mother and claimed he was adopted and wanted to go find his real parents. His mother didn't believe a word and assumed he had eaten something bad again. Shinobu was also visited by Ataru, who spouted more nonsense, so she had to go ask Sakura, who then realized she had made the wrong medicine. It was a babbling pill. On another day, Ataru's group invited each other to the beach, but there were big waves and swimming was banned. All the seaside stalls were closed. They unexpectedly encountered a weird father and son shouting at the sea and resisting the crashing waves. The group approached them and learned that the father and son owned a seaside shop that had been in the family for 3 generations, and the son, Ryo, was next in line. But since there were no customers after summer, business declined, and Ryo wanted to find another job. The two had no common ground, as the father wanted to run the shop year-round. The worst was winter, when thick snow meant no customers at all. Ataru and Shutaro decided to leave, thinking it wasn't their business. As they were leaving, they overheard that Ryo was actually a girl forced by her father to live as a boy. Their womanizing instincts kicked in, and both guys wanted to go back and help. However, Ryo had been living as a boy for too long, becoming hot-tempered and disliking physical contact. She later punched her old man and wished she could live as a normal girl. Ataru and Shutaro realized they couldn't change her mind and decided to leave again. The father then offered the whole group a free meal, asking them to help convince Ryo to take over the shop, but the two kept fighting. The group proposed chaining them together, but they kept fighting so much that they destroyed the entire shop. Ataru finally admitted it was hopeless and left. A week later, Ataru and Lum ran into the father and daughter again. They no longer had a shop and had come to a high school to do business, which turned out to be Ataru's school. The father said he'd let Ryo wear a sailor uniform if she could beat him. Ryo took off her shirt, which made Ataru lose control and interfere, getting Ryo knocked out. She then took her anger out on Ataru and had to wear the male uniform again. However, whether dressed as a girl or a boy, everyone still liked Ryo, making Shutaro feel a bit threatened. Shutaro held a meeting with Ataru's group to come up with a plan, and they decided to have Ryo wear a girl's uniform. The 4 of them then went to the father to ask for the uniform, but he said if they wanted it, they had to beat him. The four grabbed hammers and beat him down, then stole the uniform. When she brought it to Ryo, she was very happy. But Ryo didn't want to wear it yet because she wanted to defeat the old man herself and earn it, not rely on anyone else. Besides, Ryo also felt like she was still missing something. And when Ran walked in, Ryo noticed that Ran was the ideal model she was aiming for. Ryo then went to ask Lum for advice on how to become friends with Ran. Ryo wanted to learn Ran's femininity so she could wear the girl's uniform. Ran later received a friendship letter but mistook it for a love letter, so she went to ask Lum. Lum pointed out that it was Ryo and mentioned that Ryo was a girl, but Ran didn't believe her and thought Lum was just trying to hinder her popularity. That afternoon, Ryo observed Ran and learned the first lesson, not to rush. The two then went to eat together, and Ryo closely watched all of Ran's actions and gestures to imitate them. But Ataru and Lum were spotted by Ran, and when Ran questioned Lum, she claimed she was only following Ataru. When they went boating, Ryo wanted Ran to try rowing, but when Ataru saw them being close, he rowed over to interrupt. That evening, Ran scolded Lum again, and Ryo still didn't understand why girls could be both gentle and fierce, but at the very least, she wasn't going to give up until she could wear the girl's uniform. A few days later, Ryo broke her piggy bank to get money to buy women's underwear, but the amount didn't seem to be much. Meanwhile, Shinobu was on her way home and felt like she was being followed. After turning around several times, the three stalkers became aggressive and chased her, so she ended up staying with Ryo for safety. Ryo then asked Shinobu for advice on buying underwear, since she had tried going into a shop and found that the items weren't cheap and she didn't even have 1/10 of the money needed. Shinobu suggested ways to get discounts, but just then, the three stalkers showed up and asked for Shinobu's help. Turns out the three of them were from a nearby school, and their boss had fallen in love with Shinobu. Shinobu thought about their boss, but after seeing his face, she immediately rejected him. The three didn't want their boss to be heartbroken, so they asked Ryo and Shinobu to pretend to be a couple so they could take pictures and show them to their boss to make him give up. The next day, Shinobu told Ataru's group about the whole thing. That afternoon, Shinobu and Ryo pretended to be a couple on a date. The three guys followed to take pictures, but Ryo got a little too into character because they had promised her a discount coupon for the lingerie. Shinobu had to remind Ryo to tone it down because they were just acting. While eating, Ataru showed up to ruin things. He had prepared the exact item Ryo wanted in exchange for a date with Shinobu. But Lum wasn't about to let him flirt with Shinobu. The three guys had to move Ryo and Shinobu elsewhere to take more photos. After taking a photo of them at the fountain, suddenly the boss himself showed up to look for Shinobu. The discount coupon got blown away by the wind. Ryo had to choose between the two, but Shinobu punched the boss away herself. However, the coupon was then taken by Cherry's cat and burned in the fire. One of the guys then had to help calm their boss down by taking the bag of goods Ataru had prepared and pretending it was from Shinobu to soothe him. The boss started eating it right in front of Ryo, and Ataru's mom realized her stuff had gone missing. One night, the TV announced that there would be a shooting star. While Ataru's family was having dinner, a star suddenly fell right into their house and destroyed everything. It claimed to be the wishing star and said they were the lucky poor family selected this time. Ataru's parents didn't believe it and thought it was a scam, so they ignored it. It didn't insist and was about to leave, but Ataru's dad asked it to clean up the mess. So it told him to write the request down and put it in its mouth. The house was restored, and only then did they believe it could really grant wishes. The family then began thinking about what wish to make. Cherry used up one wish just to get a plate of noodles, so the family now had only one wish left. Ataru wanted a harem, Lum wanted to fix Ataru's flirting habits, and the mom wanted wealth. Ataru told his mom to discuss it with his dad and said he'd take the star back to his room, but she told him to leave the wishing rod behind and go wherever he wanted. When they went up to the room, Ataru had secretly cut star-shaped paper to cheat, and Lum also fought with him over it. But then both of them realized that the paper was useless. The whole family then gathered to discuss, but still couldn't agree on anything. Since the star friend would stay until morning, they needed to reach a consensus soon. After watching TV, the star friend went to look for something to drink, while the family decided to draw lots after a while. Ataru's dad won, and his wish was to start life over again, which made Ataru and his mom think that he regretted living with them. They then went to find the star friend, but it had drunk beer and passed out drunk. They tried to wake it up because morning was coming, but since it wouldn't wake, Cherry wrote a wish for the star friend to wake up and leave, as the 3 wishes had already been used. Cherry believed this was for the best since no one would have to fight over it anymore. A few days later, Lum returned to her spaceship and began to concoct something, which turned out to be a lipstick. She tested it out and then brought it to Ataru, asking him to apply it too, but he refused. When Ben arrived, he accidentally got smeared with the lipstick, and Lum's lips stuck to his face. Ataru realized that the lipstick acted like a magnet and assumed it was some kind of dark magic, so he pretended to throw it away but actually kept it. The next day at school, Ataru wanted to test the lipstick on someone, and the first suitable person was Ryo. He let Ryo try it, and Ryo seemed to like it. But then Ataru also applied it on his own lips to attract Ryo. Ryo quickly punched him to stop him. Lum later entered the classroom and got pulled toward Ataru due to the lipstick's magnetism, and the boys had to separate them. Lum reevaluated the situation, confused about how it turned out like this, but the girls quickly figured it out and took the lipstick from Ataru. They then wanted to apply it on Shutaro. Though he resisted, he secretly wanted an accidental kiss with Lum, so he agreed. At this time, the others were trying to keep Lum and Ataru apart due to the strong magnetic pull, but Ataru leaned toward Ryo, forcing Ryo to kick him away. Thus, the 2 boys, sworn enemies, ended up together. The other boys in class excitedly tried the lipstick too, but when the teacher walked in, the lipstick flew toward him and stuck to his head, causing everyone to be pulled toward the teacher. Ben also came in and was pulled toward Ryo, who ran away with a large group chasing behind. Ryo then realized how terrifying the lipstick was and vowed never to touch it again. A few days later, Ataru's class agreed to host a dark hot pot party where everyone would eat together in the dark. When Lum asked what that was, they simply explained it involved throwing anything into the pot and eating in the dark. Lum found it interesting and decided to make some test dishes for Ataru to try at home. But when Ataru saw the food, he sensed something was off and tried to run away. Lum chased him and forced him to try it. A dog that bit into a dropped piece of food found it so spicy that even the dog couldn't bear it. Ataru knew he had to avoid it at all costs, but Lum tricked him and shoved a piece into his mouth. His lips swelled so badly afterward that he couldn't speak. That night, Ataru asked Lum if she disliked any foods, and she mentioned she hated an alien vegetable. Ataru then asked Ben about the vegetable and tried to trick him into buying it. But Ben said he needed 10 days, while the hot pot was in 3 days. So Ataru decided to take Lum out to eat everything possible to find what she hated. But after eating noodles, Lum admitted her taste buds didn't really work and that she only enjoyed eating with Ataru. However, when a nearby table ordered something with garlic, Lum quickly left, and Ataru realized she hated garlic. He stole the garlic dish and stuffed himself with it, thinking he could use the garlic breath to scare her. But Lum had prepared a deodorizing spray to keep him away. On the day of the hot pot party, most people added edible food into the pot. Ataru added garlic, Lum added spicy seasoning, and the mysterious purple lump she had made earlier. Ben also returned early after meeting a traveling vegetable vendor, and he added the alien vegetable to the pot. When the teacher arrived, the vegetable clung to Ataru's mouth. Lum hated it because it had the ability to eat the cook in reverse. A few days later, Shutaro invited the whole group to his house to show them the octopuses his family raised. Since the family symbol was an octopus, they treated them like family members, and the most precious octopus was kept in their cold storage room. Because this species of octopus only lives in Antarctica and is an extremely rare specimen, it requires a suitable environment for captivity. Though it's said to be rare, it's actually just a blue octopus, which led Ataru to think it's far inferior compared to the grilled octopus sold at food stalls. Hearing this, the blue octopus felt hurt and ran away. The entire Shutaro household had to go on lockdown to search for it, and Shutaro held Ataru's group responsible for what they said. At the same time, Shutaro announced a huge reward for anyone who could bring the octopus back to him. The whole group then ventured into the tropical forest to find the octopus since everyone wanted the reward of their choice. However, there were many dangerous animals there, such as leeches, crocodiles, black panthers, and other hazardous creatures. Suddenly, someone in the group was dragged away by some unknown creature, and Ataru along with 2 others chose to ignore it and move on. Meanwhile, Shinobu's group found the boy who was dragged away and discovered that he was covered in ink. As for Ataru's group, they discovered that Shutero's bodyguard had been attacked by something. The three of them were about to find some random creature to trick Shutero with when they heard Shinobu scream. When they rushed back, they saw that Shinobu's group had already been captured by the octopus. Only now did Shutero reveal that Antarctic octopuses grow giant in high temperatures. Ataru and the boys then launched an attack on the octopus, but it had no effect, and they were captured as well. The octopus then tore Ryo's shirt, so the boys provoked it on purpose to lure it further away. But Lum shocked the octopus with electricity, accidentally electrocuting everyone nearby too. Shutero then showed up to try and persuade the octopus to come back. The octopus hugged Shutero so tightly that he almost suffocated. On another day, little Ben, feeling bored at Cherry's place, went to school to look for Lum. When he arrived at class, he saw Ataru eating lunch early and asked about the thing in his lunchbox. Ataru explained that it was pickled plum and tricked Ben into trying it. As soon as Ben tasted it, he became drunk and started spitting fire randomly. The whole class thought Ataru had given the kid alcohol, so he borrowed a friend's lunchbox and gave pickled plum to Lum to prove his point. At first, Lum only found it sour, but after a while, she also got drunk, started undressing, and began zapping electricity everywhere. She demanded more pickled plum, so everyone had to give her some. But then she flew around while the whole class had to hurry and find Ben, who was even more dangerous than Lum. Shutero chased after Lum, which made her cry because Ataru chose to look for Ben instead of chasing after her. The teacher saw this scene and decided to inspect all the students, suspecting that someone had brought alcohol to school. Shutero was willing to be searched if the teacher would apologize in case he was wrong, and said that if the teacher really found alcohol, he would perform a naked dance in front of the whole school. Meanwhile, Ataru was about to invite his friend to sneak out and eat, but when Lum passed by, both of them had to hide, only to get scorched by Ben's fire breath from behind. Sakura happened to walk by and gave first aid to those burned by Ben. When Ben saw Sakura, he got excited and breathed fire again, forcing Ataru and the boys to shield her. While trying to take advantage and touch her, they were all kicked away by her. Old Man Cherry arrived and gave them alcohol to rub on their burns, but Lum snatched the bottle and flew back to class. The teacher, seeing the bottle, was overjoyed and demanded the boys dance naked as promised. Since only Shutero made the vow, he was forced to carry it out. Meanwhile, Cherry was still trying to get his bottle back. One day, Ten was walking through a mushroom forest when she found someone unconscious. She went down to check, but was knocked out by the mushrooms. A few days later, Yuki asked Lum if she had seen Ten, as she had something to discuss with her. Lum didn't know, but upon returning to Ataru's house, she found Ten there. Ten explained that she had lost something very important, her chain that she always carried with her. They then went to see Yuki, who showed them something that had been sent to them, a videotape. On it were 3 people claiming to be the delinquent gang from the Galactic Middle School. One of them was the person Ten met in the mushroom forest. The trio claimed they were strong too, but never got challenged, and they believed it was because Ten's group back then was so powerful that it overshadowed them. So, they stole Ten's chain to provoke her into a fight. However, neither Yuki nor Lum remembered ever being delinquents. But in truth, the reason was because both of them kept following Ten and getting involved with her in shady activities, so they were lumped together. Ten then decided she would go have a showdown to reclaim what belonged to her. Yuki also resolved not to let things slide and would follow Ten. At this point, the 3 junior high girls began to feel worried because Ten, Lum, and Yuki all had quite the reputation and were very strong. The 3 started to regret it, but since there was still no guarantee they would lose, they went to ask a computer to find the best strategy. Meanwhile, Yuki and Lum had already chased after Ten. Yuki wanted Ten to pay the bill for the DVD player and monitor she had just broken, and Lum had the map to the dual location. They arrived at the meeting point, which turned out to be a restaurant on Earth. After eating, Ten asked if they were going to fight and where her chain was. They pulled out the chain and then just ran off. Lum's group chased after them to get it back, but the 3 girls split up. The pink-haired girl disappeared and was swinging the chain when Lum smacked her with a hammer, making her reveal herself. The girl in snakeskin clothing took the chain and ran off. She threw it to her teammate, who pretended to faint. but it was just a trick to help the snakeskin girl escape. She had the ability to shed her skin and hide. At that moment, I realized this group were delinquents, but all their tricks were for running away and avoiding being bullied. Lum then managed to grab the chain and knocked the girl unconscious, but the chain broke too, so she had to hide it. Ten arrived, and Lum was worried that if Ten found out the chain was broken, she would go berserk. They didn't know what the chain really meant to Ten. Just then, a flying robot chef arrived and stepped on Lum's group, but luckily, there was a hole beneath them so they didn't get crushed. Lum was now afraid Ten would take Ataru as revenge for the broken chain. The robot ran out of fuel, so the three girls bought salt and refueled it. It then spat out a pile of chains and flew away. The girls thought they could use the pile of chains to fool Ten, but Ten insisted her chain was one of a kind. She then had Lum heat the chains and asked Yuki to rapidly freeze them. Normal chains would break from such temperature differences, but Ten's special chain remained intact. Once she got her chain back, Ten left in peace. When Lum got home, she found out that the chain was actually the key to Ten's house. But right as she entered, the three girls showed up from the back door, claiming the chain they had was the real one and demanding a rematch. Ten ignored them, too exhausted after being away from home for 10 days. A few days later, Lum's group gathered again, this time because Yuki revealed that the sea urchin planet was about to be developed, and the secret they had hidden there was about to be exposed. Years ago, when Lum's group of 4 were still attending Galactic Elementary School together, they had a robot teacher named Cow 2. He was the only teacher who could control their mischief. Ten didn't like being lectured by a teacher, so she got everyone to pull pranks on him. They rigged a pulley on the door and tied an extremely heavy weight, intending to drop it on him when he entered. But when he walked in, the weight didn't affect him at all. Only when he bowed did he realize he had been pranked, and he punished Lum's group. Yuki didn't participate, and Ran got dragged into it unwillingly. Ataru and Shutaro overheard this and confirmed that the group really had been mischievous. Ran kept getting pulled into it despite not wanting to, while Yuki never joined and didn't even try to stop them. The group went on to try more tricks, like using chains for Lum to electrocute the teacher and shut him down temporarily, though he still collapsed on top of them. Ataru figured if Cow 2 was that tough, they should use a rocket, and they actually did. They fired a rocket at their teacher, but he was completely unharmed and got so mad he chased after them. The 4 then got on a flying car and escaped the school, but he kept pursuing them until they fled into the sea urchin star. They flew erratically until he got stuck there, and since no one lived on that planet, they had left him there all this time. And now, the whole group could only hope that everything had settled down, but with that old man's grudge holding nature, there was no way it definitely hadn't. For them, a long time might have passed, but to him, time meant nothing. Immediately, the tall guy showed up and gave Lum's group a beating just to vent, then flew off. And Ran, whether she liked it or not, still had to take the blow. A few days later, Ryoko unexpectedly created a cursed doll. She then brought it to Shutaro's room to test it. At first, Shutaro didn't believe it, but when he started to experience the same effects as the doll, he began to worry. Ryoko realized how dangerous the doll was, so she decided to entrust it to someone else to keep it safe, and that person was Ataru. He didn't know what the doll was for, but he decided to guard it for Ryoko. The next morning, Ataru went to school with the doll hidden inside his shirt. During a break, Ataru fell asleep and the doll bumped into the desk, causing Shutaro to be affected. He suspected something had happened to the doll. Later, during gym class, Ataru and Shutaro were doing push-ups, and just as Ataru collapsed, Shutaro suddenly collapsed too. During recess, Ataru accidentally teased Shinobu and got shoved into a wall. Shutaro got pushed as well, which made him even more suspicious that Ataru was carrying the doll. When Lum shocked Ataru with electricity, Shutaro became certain of his theory. But he had to quietly retrieve the doll because it seemed Ataru didn't know what it really did. Then Ataru started fooling around and got into trouble, so Shutaro had to protect him. Later, Ataru climbed to the rooftop to play and nearly jumped off, forcing Shutaro to catch him only to fall off himself. Ataru was touched by Shutaro's act of kindness, but Shutaro now demanded the thing around Ataru's neck. Ataru took out his wallet, but what Shutaro really meant was the doll. Ataru was willing to hand it over if Shutaro told him what it was for. Then, one of Ryoko's bodyguards came and explained everything. so Ataru took the opportunity to torment Shutaro. That night, Shutaro returned home bitter and made a doll to get back at Ataru. The next day at school, both of them used their dolls to torment each other, and in the end, neither gained anything. They just became laughingstocks in front of the whole class. Meanwhile, in space, a street vendor was feeling bored because his newly made products weren't selling. Suddenly, little Ben flew by, and the vendor offered to trade a candy stick for a bottle. Ben agreed and traded, deciding to give it to Lum. But while waiting for her to return, Ben accidentally activated the bottle, which sucked Lum inside. She was then miniaturized and trapped inside the bottle and had to break out to see how to reverse the effect. To fix it, they needed an enlarging bottle, so she told Ben to go buy one right away. She then encountered Ataru and thought this was her chance to gain his love. She lied, saying she had a shrinking illness and needed his love to return to normal. But he ignored her and just went on living as usual. After dinner, Ataru still found Lum annoying even when she was tiny. He even said it'd be nice if she stayed small forever. But that night, while sleeping next to her, he still tried not to crush her with his hand. The next day, Lum had to skip school, and on the way back, Ataru found out the truth about Lum's condition and locked her in a cage. But as soon as Ataru left, a cat sneaked in to catch Lum. Meanwhile, Ben asked around about the bottle seller and found out that due to poor sales, the seller was destroying all the leftover bottles, smashing them all before sunset. So Ben rushed off to stop the seller, but the turtle told him he was too slow. So Ben went to look for a motorbike to move faster. Ben later found Ataru and told him to bring Lum immediately because the situation was urgent. When Ataru got home, he saw that Lum had been caught by the cat, but she was fighting back, so he had to climb onto the roof to retrieve her. She didn't trust Ataru, so he had to leap over and grab her, and Ben arrived with the bike just in time to catch them and speed away. They had to race against time, but luckily the enlarging bottle was sturdy and could withstand multiple attacks from the vendor. Ataru managed to throw Lum into the bottle and help her return to normal size. Even though Ataru usually hated Lum, he was still happy that she had returned to normal. A few days later, on her way home, Shinobu encountered a little fox being bullied by a pack of vicious dogs. She used a stick to chase them off, but when they didn't back down, she picked up an entire log and charged in fiercely. The dogs ran away quickly, and Shinobu handed the fox over to the police. However, the officers got distracted, and the fox ended up escaping. The fox then followed Shinobu and saw Ataru suddenly run out and hug her. Realizing that Ataru was Shinobu's friend, and remembering the gang leader who had followed Shinobu previously, the fox wanted to protect her. But Shinobu was able to handle things on her own. The next day at school, the fox transformed into a mini Ataru to appear before Shinobu. When the rest of the class and the teacher arrived, they saw the mini Ataru cleaning the floor and thought the real Ataru was just being unusually diligent that day. But then the real Ataru showed up, and the class suspected that one of them was an imposter. Of course, everyone knew which was real, but they chose to gang up on the Ataru they hated more. Ataru then tried to expose the fox and forced it to reveal its true form. When the group tried to punish the fox, Shinobu protected it, knowing that it only wanted to repay her. After that, the fox impersonated the teacher and taught the class, while the real teacher was left hanging somewhere. Not long after, the shopping district and the principal decided to host a contest to determine the school's beauty queen, with a prize of 150,000 yen. Many people entered the competition. After the votes were counted, 8 names were selected. These contestants were then tested for strength to advance to the next round. Sakura, Shinobu, Lum, Ran, and Ryo all passed. Ryo's father initially stopped her from joining the contest, but after seeing the prize money, he changed his mind and wanted her to win so he could rebuild his shop. Meanwhile, Ryo herself wanted to win to be recognized as a girl. The 5 girls were sent directly to the finals, as Ataru was the one directing the contest. They stepped into the ring, and Ataru announced that the competition would not only be based on beauty, but also on intelligence and bravery. Everyone was participating because of the 150,000 yen prize. Ataru then began the final round. The first event was guessing the object inside a box. All 5 girls put their hands in. Lum guessed that it was baby Ben, but missed part of the answer. Ryo immediately recognized a watermelon and won the first round. Ataru then introduced the sponsor of the first round, a fruit shop. The second round involved retrieving candy using only the items provided. Sakura and Shinobu felt it was an insult to their intelligence, but Ryo quickly arranged the items and got the candy, winning the round. This round was sponsored by a candy store and a furniture store. The third round was a noodle eating contest, obviously sponsored by a noodle shop. Sakura tried to restrain herself so she wouldn't look like a glutton, but before she was full, the others had already collapsed. The judges gave her higher points, putting her in the lead. In the next round, Ataru asked the girls to change into battle costumes. Everyone ended up wearing outfits that looked like swimsuits. Ryo, who had originally worn a bikini, was reminded by her father that she was supposed to fight, not model, so she wrapped herself in bandages instead. Ran, realizing she was the weakest among them, resorted to tricks. She kissed the other 3 girls, and Lum immediately knew that Ran had drained their energy. Thinking she was now the strongest in the ring, Ran believed she could defeat Lum. However, their real opponents were wild animals brought in by Ataru, not each other. The sponsor this time was the zoo, and the 5 contestants had to battle 5 wild beasts. But 3 of the girls had already lost their strength. The first match was between Lum and a tiger. Lum quickly rushed in and kicked the tiger's head, but it didn't go down. She had to resort to her electric bite to finally knock it out. Next up was a giant snake, so Sakura took over. She was quickly wrapped tightly by the snake, and her provocative pose ended up earning her bonus points. The animal team and Shinobu wanted to swap fighters, but Ataru had already been knocked unconscious by a gorilla. Shinobu had to enter the ring to stop the gorilla, but got flung away and landed in the bear's arms. She tried to pin it down but wasn't strong enough. Shutaro transformed and tried to jump in, but was thrown out instantly by the gorilla. Lum rushed in to help Sakura. Meanwhile, Ryo was tossed into the ring by her father and came face to face with the tiger, but she was immediately smacked across the floor. At that moment, Ran was about to run away, but was blocked by a lion and forced back onto the arena. She was pinned down by the lion, and Lum couldn't handle everything by herself, so Lum suggested that Ran drain the strength of the animals. However, Ran refused, so Lum had no choice but to ask Ataru for help. Ataru assisted by cheating on Ran's behalf and smacking the lion on the head, allowing Ran to run over and kiss Sakura. Sakura regained her strength, punched the gorilla away, and simultaneously escaped from the python. Then it was Shinobu, who was being crushed by a bear. She struggled, but Lum had to help Ran kiss Shinobu. After a while, Shinobu managed to lift the entire bear and throw it away. Shinobu and Sakura then brought the gorilla and the bear and threw them at each other. Ran then tried to kiss Ryo, but Lum suddenly punched a tiger that flew across the arena, accidentally dragging Ran away with it. Ryo tried to run off the arena, but was held back by his father. Ran chased after him to kiss him, but the girls tried to stop her. Lum had to release the python to chase the girls away and help Ran kiss Ryo. Ryo regained his strength and tossed both Ran and the python back into the arena. The 5 girls then teamed up and knocked out all 5 animals. The judges eventually called the match a tie, as they had been so engrossed in watching that they forgot to tally the final scores. As a result, the prize was split evenly among the 5 of them, but the prize turned out to be a physical item rather than cash, which made Sakura furious. After the contest ended, others like Rei, Yuki, and Ten also showed up. Meanwhile, Ataru and Lum had snuck out to count the money, as Ataru had made a decent amount from the event. Lum snatched the money and caused Ataru to fall on top of her. Lum then asked Ataru if she was now the queen of his heart. Just as the moment was turning romantic, Sakura and Shinobu appeared to ruin the mood, intending to beat him up for dragging them into the whole thing. And with that, the movie comes to an end.